I want to thank you once again for hopping on the call. I appreciate it greatly. I know you're a busy guy.
Well, you know, you got it. I'm very happy to do it.
Thank you. Growing up, did you always know you want to become something in sports?
I don't know. Probably not. I really liked sports. I don't think I thought about um like a career. I don't think I thought about career much. Sure, I
Hmm.
would have been like a baseball player or something, but other than that, I don't think I didn't certainly never went to school, undergraduate or anything like that thinking I really need to focus my thing in on talking about sports because
Hmm.
if I, probably would have picked a pretty different educational path. I wanted to be a fiction writer. I always wanted to be a writer, like to write
Hmm.
novels. So I don't think I don't think I had this in mind. Pretty
I
random.
saw I saw that you read a few novels. How have you joined writing those?
I'm sorry.
I saw that you'd written a few like
Oh,
not little books. How do you
not
join
little.
writing those? Not little,
Yeah,
but
not little.
yeah.
Come on, man. Uh, yeah, that's sort of that's the thing I love the most is writing fiction. So I've written 4 novels that have been published. I've written a couple others that haven't. I'm at
Hmm.
work on another one right now, and the good thing I guess about especially now that I for the last 10 years or something I've only just covered the NFL. When
Hmm.
it's not NFL season, it gives me time to do the thing that I really love. But it's very it's hard enough to make a living doing the dumb job that I have, but it's really, 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 really hard to have make a living doing fiction writing. So fortunately, I can carve out a certain amount of time to write stories and not have to worry too much about how much it pays.
Hmm. In college did you try to focus on writing first, then later on you started getting different focus?
You would have thought. See, I was what we would call what's the word, a coward. Um, I really like always knew I wanted to be a fiction writer from like I don't know 12 years old, 13 years old. I knew it. I wanted to write books. I loved reading
Hmm.
stories. I didn't know how to do it. I wasn't that good at it, but I tried real hard. And uh I've always had this sort of negative voice in my head that says you can't do that. Like what you can't just be a fiction writer, that's not practical. So in undergrad I was an economics major and a political science major and I took creative writing and English kind of on the side.
Hmm.
So when I was your age I was going to uh econ 102 and American government whatever, and then on the
Hmm.
side I'd be the one non-writer in the writing classes too. So maybe I had a minor technically in creative writing, but so then 1 year out of undergrad, I went to business school, MBA. Like again, these are all the things that you're supposed to do,
Hmm.
make your way in the world, make sure you have a safety net, you know what you're doing, and then on the side you can just write. Um so really all through my 20s that was me. All through my 20s I think looking back now I kind of wish I'd had the courage of my convictions a little more. I mean, everybody knows that you go through what you go through. You in your life, you've gone what through what you've gone through, and you've
Hmm.
taken paths and not taken other paths. We were talking before we started about you looked at UMass and didn't wind up where I am in Amherst, and if you had,
Yeah.
something would have been different. And so I can't really like the things that happened to me in my 20s or whenever helped make me the writer or whatever that I am now. But my my whole thing during that time was like be in business school or have real jobs or whatever, but always spend time doing fiction writing on the side.
Hmm.
And it just I didn't have the courage of my convictions until the end of my 20s, and finally I was like, you know what I really love? I should be a writer. So I kind of quit it all and I went back to school and got a master's in creative writing, and that sort of set me down a different path.
You're saying that. What type of jobs did you take after that?
It was at this little place called ESPN. Um,
Yeah.
so the story about how this all happened, why you even know who I am, and why I have a podcast that you listen to, or whatever, is goofy. So all I really knew coming out of graduate school the second time, the MFA, was that I didn't want to go back to those same jobs that I'd had being a producer or a project manager or a creative director, which were fine, but just not really for me.
Hmm.
And I mean, the MFA, they call it a terminal degree, and I think that's probably for a reason because it's not, you're not, in other words, you don't go on and get a PhD or in creative writing or anything, but there's not a lot you can do with it. But I was done with school. I was living here in Amherst. I um started writing things on spec and just sending them out to people, and
Mm-hmm.
um found one guy who let me write for paid for me a little bit to write for a website that was like for gambling. That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then I found another website that was having a contest to be a great fantasy writer, and so I wrote a fantasy column and I won that contest. And the reward was, um, congratulations, you get to write for us, but we don't pay you anything. And then, but got my stuff out there, and somebody at Yahoo saw my stuff there and said, "Hey, do you want to do what you're doing for us, but do it for money? Not very much, but a little bit." And I was like, "Sure."
Mm-hmm.
And then within 6 months, ESPN said the same thing, and like suddenly I was at ESPN.
How was that when you got that ESPN gig? You were like, whoa. Were you like shocked that you got it, or you're like,
Well, no, because
finally?
I'm amazing, and like obviously I think I'm the best. It all seemed foolish, because I was really being brought in to write about fantasy sports, and my training is to write, something that like plumbs the depths of my soul. I'm looking to
Mm-hmm.
write literary fiction, and here I am, writing goofy, like, is Michael Vick good? That kind of stuff. You might not remember Michael Vick, but he was a football player.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was cool. I mean, so immediately at ESPN, I'm not just writing football. I was writing baseball. I was writing NASCAR, all from a fantasy perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
From a they were that was kind of when fantasy was really exploding. 2008, something like that. How old were you in
Mm-hmm.
2008?
I was 6.
Yeah, so you don't remember that too well. Um, and it was objectively cool. Like, of course it was objectively cool, but
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my goal. It wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I don't think I walked around going, "Pinch me, this is my dream," because it really isn't my. None of this is really my dream, but it's cool.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not. I'm not the success that I've now had over the last however many years since then. I don't take for granted. It's awesome. The fact that you're asking me to do this is super flattering. Like, it's great. It isn't
Mm-hmm.
what I envisioned, and I don't value it above everything else, but it pays the bills really well. It's great, and lets me time to do writing. And like you've said, I've had books published, so um, that's been awesome. I mean, I'm not like Stephen Kingly famous, but there are some
Mm-hmm.
people who like what I do fiction wise too, and it's a pretty, it's like if you put that whole ball into a life, like everything we just talked about and smushed it all in, like I'm
Yeah.
that. Without one, probably the other wouldn't exist, and they're both pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely pretty cool. I was writing. I never heard of fantasy NASCAR. How was
Oh,
writing like stuff like that?
not only that, but um, I was so right when I went to ESPN, within a couple of years of me going to ESPN, uh, they acquired. That was the first time they ever acquired the rights to NASCAR, and I didn't really know
Mm-hmm.
very much about NASCAR, but they were like, does somebody want to basically be?" They started. I guess at the time the idea was it was kind of like Sports Center for NASCAR. So it
Mm-hmm.
was the nightly show. It's called NASCAR Now, and it was the nightly show before, a half hour or an hour before. I don't know if it still exists. I didn't care that much about NASCAR, but I was like, well, if nobody else wants to be on this show, so I was part of the original cast of NASCAR Now, and so I'm like literally me and Dale Jarrett just hanging out, and Dale Jarrett's like a big deal and was a big deal in NASCAR, still is, and he was really nice, and like here I am like talking about NASCAR, and of course I don't know anything about it, but I knew the numbers, so like I just kind of, let's face it, I fudged my way through.
Yeah, that's NASCAR is interesting. I was like, I never knew it was like a fantasy type thing at all.
I mean, at this point, I think they're probably fantasy everything. Any sport,
That's
there's
true.
fantasy, and I mean, to be honest, if you think about it, if you're drafting drivers in any given week, and then all you need is, like, listen to me, I haven't played fantasy NASCAR in 15 years, but or 10 years, but like uh, there's enough variability. Somebody can finish first or they could finish 40th, right? And so
Mm.
I think that's all you need for fantasy. Like all you're doing,
Yeah.
the difference, but something I've always tried to communicate to family members who don't understand what I do for a living is like the difference between covering a sport and covering a sport for fantasy is pretty negligible. All you're really
Hmm.
doing is trying to determine who's good and and then maybe who's overrated and maybe who's a little undervalued. And
Hmm.
instead of thinking of it in terms of uh the team, oh, the Bills are going to be better than people expect this year, instead you think of it in terms of Josh Allen's going to be better than you expected this year.
Hmm.
uh and so I don't know, it seems like when I explain it that way, people go, okay, you're pretty much just covering sports, and I go, yeah, it's so it was pretty much just like covering NASCAR, like who has done well on that particular track before. I can look that up, right? Hey, everybody, you're
Hmm.
forgetting that guy on this kind of track does pretty good. And yeah, so whatever. It didn't last that long. I didn't do it that long, but
Definitely interesting things. But did you have any like mentors you would say like ESPN or even before that?
not so much in the like fantasy world, because I was really part of the first generation of fantasy experts, so we were all sort of doing it all together at once for the first time. I lucked
Hmm.
into the timing as far as that goes, really. I would say much more on like the fiction side, professors who were instrumental to my writing getting better,
Hmm.
because you'll I went back to school for creative writing at a pretty late age, relatively speaking. There were a lot of like 22-year-olds, and I was 30, something, or 31 or something. And I've been writing for a while. I think I'm hot stuff. I think I know what I'm doing. And then to find people who would, you know, Im- imprint upon you that you're good, but you're not as good as you could be. And here are some ways that I can look at your writing and think how much it could get better. And I had a few of those.
I get what you're saying with that. Would you say that was like that's a major part of why your writing improved?
Sure, I would.
Definitely. So when you were at ESPN, what was your favorite part about being there?
Um, it was 8 years. It's hard to like it look back and go. I I think my favorite part was other people who worked there and spoke the language that I spoke, about trying to look. I mean, if you listen to my show, so my take on sports in general is a little different than a lot of people who do what I do, which is try to see past the noise.
Hmm.
Um, try to take advantage of the noise, I guess, more than anything. Try to see where the noise is wrong and overstated, and try to kind of turn it around and see where see what people are missing, I guess, or what they're overvaluing. And finding
Hmm.
people like that at ESPN who spoke that language, and we would talk about it all the time, write about it all the time, text about it all the time, about things that we think are being done, that in the larger sports media, which tends to be pretty dumb. um
Hmm.
that's fun. I think find that process, maybe the best way to say it is that like that process over those years helped me find my own voice in covering sports, which is now something that people who listen to my podcast are very familiar with, but I probably didn't come out of the womb with it. It was earned over the course of like listening to people and going, okay, I think that's, like, you just heard Terry Bradshaw say that on Sunday. I don't think that's a real thing. Whereas finding someone else and being like, oh, that's a really interesting point that actually seems to hint at some larger truth. Let's, I guess if I were to describe how I am on that show that you listen to, or some people listen to, is like skeptical. I'm willing to believe, but like prove it to me. And I'm somewhat skeptical when everybody says the Bills are too run heavy for Josh Allen to be good for fantasy. There's
Hmm.
always things where I'm a little like, hey, um, maybe we should unpack it and see where people are exaggerating or something.
Have you ever? What was the most ridiculous thing you ever heard like a fan say to you? Say you got to pick wrong or something correct. Did you hear anything absolutely ridiculous?
Oh God, I don't have a. let's see what comes to mind. Fortunately, I don't keep like a running catalog of all the slights. Twitter, there wasn't Twitter then, right? When I first started,
Uh-huh.
there really wasn't Twitter, and Twitter like makes it a little more immediate. You kind of have very big, thick skin because you're always going to get things wrong, right? You're making a call
Yeah.
on literally everybody in the NFL. You're always going to make a call. The most ridiculous stuff. Well, the stuff that was kind of proved to be most ridiculous, I remember the Alex Collins year 3 years ago or something. I don't know if
Hmm.
you were paying.
Yeah, I remember Alex Collins.
Sure. So he had been with Seattle. He'd gone to Baltimore. He'd looked okay at the end of one year, and I just stat wise, but I just thought he wasn't good. Right. I just thought he
Hmm.
was nah. And I remember, first of all, just overall rankings that you would find would have Alex Collins as a second round pick, and I was like flabbergasted, outraged. Like all you're doing
Hmm.
is telling me you think it's a good offense and he's the starting running back, and you have no assurances that either one of those two things are true. But I remember one fan calling me a very bad name, idiot, for for doubting Alex Collins, and it always stuck with me. I wasn't a very bad name, idiot, as it turned out.
Yeah, definitely Alex Collins in early. I don't think I don't think he's in the league anymore, right? 2 years ago, maybe he
He
left 20
he
years ago.
tried to come back with the Seahawks actually, but he didn't make any. He hasn't. I think he might still be technically on the roster, but he hasn't made any noise. Yeah.
Definitely Alex Collins, interesting name, but it's definitely a correct thing. But I gotta ask, how was this in the beginning of starting out Harris football?
So it was pretty nerve wracking. Um, I left ESPN without really the intention of doing my own thing. I sort of left to leave. It had run its course. I was kind of done with it.
Hmm.
It had become kind of like do you know that movie, that Bill Murray movie, Groundhog's Day? You ever seen that?
Yeah, same
Yeah.
day over and over.
Right. That's what it felt like, same year over and over. It kind of felt like it was great and it was a great opportunity, but I feel like I'd outgrown it or whatever. It just felt like I was going to be doing the exact same thing until I died if I'd stayed there.
Hmm.
So I left, and then I thought, what am I going to do now? And my contract was up kind of in July of that year. It was 2015.
Hmm.
And because it was July, I had kind of that whole, you spend the whole off, or maybe not the whole off season, but certainly from May forward, from May through August, well, you're preparing for the season, right?
Hmm.
You're getting ready and grinding lots and lots of stuff into your head about what you think and what your opinions are, whatever. And I had done that for the upcoming season, so I was like, all right, well, I'm like ready to be popped. I've got so much opinion in me for the 2015 season. What am I going to do? I don't know. I don't really know how to make a podcast. I'd been doing one at ESPN. They didn't really give me lots of promotion or anything like that, but I'd been doing one. I knew how to do it. The biggest question was like, how do you record one? Where do you
Hmm.
upload it? How do you get sponsors? How do you get guests? How do you record anything? I knew none of that. I made a lot of phone calls to people who were smarter than me, who had done it or who knew people who'd done it, and uh, I just sort of like, honestly, what I thought was, I'll do this whole season and I'll try a show 5 days a week,
Hmm.
and I'll get to January and it won't have succeeded, and I'll have to figure out what I'm going to do next. And I didn't know if it would be in sports or if I'd just go get a real job or if I would just, I don't know. Probably wasn't going to be a writer because I wasn't making any money at writing at that point. And I started doing the show, and really, I mean, it was stressful not knowing how to do stuff. I'm sure you know that feeling.
Yeah,
And people do this, but I don't know how to do it,
yeah,
and
you're saying with that.
so you kind of have to figure it out. And the real nightmare scenario, the thing I was most worried about was like it would get to November 15th, and I would have promised the audience that I was going to do five shows a week all the way through the end of the season, but 182 people were listening, and I was going to have to just like mail it in the rest of the way. And
Hmm.
instead, within just that first couple of weeks, it just was like a rocket ship. It went crazy. It was the perfect timing for when podcasts became much more popular, and fantasy was already really popular, and I had a pretty big social media following, and just sort of, yeah, it just took off. So then my worries changed. My worries changed to, can I get enough advertising? Can I, all this business stuff? Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. So do you say you started off and you enjoyed it right away with the great success, or would you say there were some bumps in the road?
Well, there are bumps, but you can enjoy it.
Yeah.
As much as I enjoy it, you know, it's work. It's a hell of a lot of work. I watch every single game on film. So every season is an endurance test of, 4 months
Hmm.
just trying to get to the end. There's a finish line way out there. I just got to get to it. It's fun, and I'm talking to my friends because I always have guests on the show, and
Hmm.
so it's fun, but it's also brutal, and the way I cover it is just not the way most people cover it. It's a full contact, full body. Just I don't sleep some nights. It's really intense, but beats breaking rocks.
Yeah.
Can't sit here and say that any job I had previously was anywhere close to as fun because that would be not true.
What are some of your favorite things about having Harris football, watching all the games? I know you great film study.
When it ends. No, I think the best part about it is just having a guest on every day and sort of, uh, I'm trying. Well, no, that's not true. The best part is the audience, and
Mhm.
that sounds like a really kiss ass thing to say to the audience, but it absolutely is. It's such a participatory audience. They make songs, right? They make mixtapes on the
Yes,
show
I
that
see those.
that that people that songs like karaoke songs that are about dumb things that I say on the show. There's just a legion of thousands of people who listen every day and interact on social media and send me emails, and it's just incredible. And it's over a dumb thing, but I like to say on the show that we're talking about fantasy, but we're not really talking about fantasy. We're talking about connecting both
Mhm.
with ourselves, with me, with the audience with each other, and the audience with their own league mates, and whether they listen or whatever. Like there's a meta conversation that's going on there that is not about football. It's about your pose. It's about sort of being skeptical, but hopefully having somewhat of a heart. It's about feeling like somebody is decent and somebody else is kind of also decent. And it's just nice to know that person's in the world. Um,
Mhm.
that's the best part. And then I was also going to say, just I have a guest every day, and they're my friends from the industry, and I have as much fun talking with them before we start recording than when we record, because we've known each other a long time, and it's a bunch of teasing and grab ass, and it's fun.
You're saying with that. How much do you enjoy writing the yearly player profile?
The almanac, you mean?
Yeah, the almanac. I mean.
um, I'm in the middle of it right now, so it's not a great time to ask me. If you asked me in like November, I'd be like, "It's great. Are you kidding? It's great." But yeah, I've today I just started working on the running backs. Quarterbacks are done. It's 240 profiles, and I've written about 40 of them, so I got a long way to go. Uh, it's a lot. I don't, I it's necessary prep for me to know how I feel about. I go back and watch tons of players on film, and
Mhm.
I try to kind of remember what my opinions were as I expressed them as the year was going along, and maybe sanity check those a little bit, uh, and then I have to make sure I know what I think, and then once I write a profile, I kind of, okay, that's my opinion on the guy, and then I'm willing to have it changed as we go along, but that's at least the baseline. So it's good to establish a baseline. It's just a hell of a lot of work. Um, by the end of it, I'm definitely ready for it to be over. But again, beats breaking rocks.
Yeah. Is there any specific work that you're most proud of?
The novels,
Mhm.
that's what I really put my heart and soul into. The almanac and all the writing I did back in the day for ESPN and Yahoo, it's disposable. It goes, it's fun, but who cares what I wrote about Cam Newton 2016? It doesn't really matter
Mhm.
anymore. Hopefully the books, you know, I wouldn't say millions of people have read them, but I can honestly say thousands of people have read them and hopefully enjoyed them, and they are in the world, and they run a little deeper as far as like how I feel about life and stuff.
Mhm. When you were studying on the films during the NFL season, I know you say you have little free time, but during that little amount of free time, what's your favorite things to do?
Honestly, it's writing. That's fiction writing is my thing. It's my avocation. But you're right, I don't do as much of it during the football season. That's more of an off season thing. I'll play golf some. My shoulder's been bugging me lately, but play. I have
Hmm.
buddies in LA that I play golf with, and buddies in Massachusetts that I play golf with. Um, and you know, obviously you have to be able to lift more than McCaffrey, so I have to work out. That's a running joke. Everybody who's listening to this is like, what? Uh, so yeah, go to the gym. I'd say that's about all I have the time for.
What would be some of your biggest advice to young people like me trying to get something in the sports world?
Um, write like hell. My thing would, you can't really talk unless you know how to write.
Hmm.
Um, I'm coming at it from a writer's perspective. I'm a writer before I'm a talker, but I know that facility with words, if I have it, that people like when they hear me talk, or the ability to react spontaneously and improv with somebody, or the ability to be interesting when I wasn't supposed to talk about the thing, but hopefully then I was interesting when I talked about a different thing. That all comes from thinking about words and
Hmm.
knowing what order to put them in. Uh, I just think make yourself write every single day. Make yourself write something in complete sentences that isn't just notes. The more further we go into, and listen, I'm part of the internet generation, right? So, but the further we
Hmm.
go into it, the less emphasis there is on that. And uh, and I get it, rightly so. We have the ability to just immediately go to video. We can go on Instagram and just start talking. Uh, but it's mostly nonsense, you know, because we don't know how to put words together. So I mean, be reading and be writing. I'd say those are the biggest things, and not just sports. Reading uh, books that you like, not that things that feel like deathly homework or whatever, but books that aren't, books that challenge you, even though you like them.
Hmm.
That are not even nonfiction is great. Fiction that's not the simple stuff, not the spy novel that's fun to kick back, right? But the one where people are actually challenging, and then writing what you think. If you're gonna watch the Celtics coming up tonight, then make yourself, when you're done, figure out what would your lead be. What would your
Hmm.
then write it down, and then what would that first paragraph? What's the stinger? Like, okay, well, like write it down, as opposed to just I would write a kick-ass story about that game. Like, make yourself do it,
Yeah.
because the first of all, there aren't a ton of jobs that are just talking and not writing. Most jobs,
Hmm.
especially at the beginning, are writing jobs. And also, even to be a good talker, even to know the angle into something, even to be able to ask the right questions, uh, and to feel like it's a conversation as opposed to a list of questions, right? That's an art that comes from facility with words. So
Hmm.
wow, that was facility with words is a long answer, but that's the idea. My idea is read stuff that challenges you, and then make yourself write a lot.
You're saying with that. I tried to do that. I tried talk, writing. Writing is always kind of one of my weaknesses, but I've been improving on it. Where like I have an article coming out soon, my school paper, right about the basketball Summer Olympics coming up. So I think it's gonna be a very interesting one. But trying to get a mix of everything. So I get what you're saying with that.
Sure, I'll just say that's awesome, and you just keep doing it, and do it even when it's not for publication. Do it for yourself. Just keep a
Hmm.
journal or online, whatever. It doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be actually like a blog where people can read, but just something to make you yourself constantly work that muscle. Like, it's,
Hmm.
if we wanted to be in the NFL, we'd have to work those muscles. We'd have to be in the gym every single day. There's no way to do it otherwise, right? You can't be at the top
Yeah.
of the game without working the muscle and having it just be elite and the best. And the fact is that there are a hell of a lot of people who like sports. There are a hell of a
Hmm.
lot of kids who are, you know, 20, you're not even 22 yet, but there's a hell of a lot of 22-year-old kids coming out of college who are like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm going to start a blog. I'm going to make my stuff known and shine to somebody. And the fact is, there are so many kids who want to do that. Okay, that just means you got to be awesome at it, right?
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you can't do it. Not at all. I think now more than ever, there's more avenues. Not everybody just has to go work for ESPN. There are ways
Yeah.
to make it on your own. There are ways to, but like the way it's really going to happen is just by being better than other people, and that doesn't just magically, You know,
Mhm.
it doesn't, you don't just wake up one day and you're like, wow, it turned out I'm better than everybody already. Right? It happens because you do stuff like this, and but you make yourself write a ton, and you make yourself read a ton, and then
Mhm.
I so like I guess my way of saying my advice is the thing that you did for the Summer Olympics. It's awesome. Keep doing it. Make
Mhm.
yourself talk about everything. Pardon me, tickle in my throat. Make yourself talk. Do podcasts. Make yourself listen, and make yourself read.
And you're saying with that, I already see. Like, I started doing these interviews back in November. I just sent a ton of emails, messages, and my first person that got back to me was former NBA All Star Antonio Davis. Probably my worst call I've ever done because of my first. Since now it's feeling improvement. And same, I do a lot of broadcasting at school. I broadcast the games. At first, I was terrible, but now getting more comfortable with it.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own style. Nobody can tell you. You have to make sure people can understand what you're saying. Don't mumble. You mumbling a little bit. Don't mumble
Yeah,
too
that's my
much.
little problem.
So, but that's okay. Hey, you're at school, man. This is what we're supposed to do. And I look at me. I'm coughing like crazy. I think that's awesome. And being able to look back on 6 months of doing interviews and to hear this one and to be like, oh wow, compared to the Antonio Davis one, I was way more engaged. I was mumbling less. I could hear that we were having a real conversation as opposed
hmm
to whatever. Not this interview, but I do a lot of interviews, and there are times where I can tell, especially on radio, a host doesn't know who I am, and they're just running through a list of questions. So,
hmm
what do you expect is going to happen with Zeke Elliott this year? And they're not listening. And then I give my answer, and they come back and go, so how do you feel about Andrew Luck this year? And then I say he's retired, and they're not listening. And then so like part of being a good interviewer and part of being a good journalist in general is that sense that you're having a conversation and it's not just pre-structured, pre-formatted, right? Um,
hmm
which you're doing good at. Like I'm not, that's not a criticism, but it's all,
Yeah,
I think it's great to have done so many interviews that you can look back and go, oh, I'm getting better at this. That's awesome. It's like
yeah.
really encouraging.
I appreciate it. But those are all the questions I have. Anything else you want to add?
I don't have anything else I want to add. Thank you for asking me to do it.
I appreciate you off on this call greatly. I know very busy. Draft ended about a month ago. Still busy time.
Yeah, it's busy, but it's no problem. I'm very glad to do it. It was nice to talk to you.
Thank you.